Hey, welcome back to another episode of Just Call Me Josie. Today it is time for the first Pan That Palette update. So we are going to take a closer look at the Urban Decay and Gwen Stefani eyeshadow palette that I chose for this project. So here we have the current state of the palette and what it's looking like right now, and I will of course insert some close-ups so you guys can get a good look at the progress that I've made. And the first and most obvious thing that you can see that has happened since the intro is that I have hit pan on the shade Punk, and that is my favorite shade in this palette, so I am not surprised. Because Punk is such a dark, sort of rich shade, I do use it to deepen up my looks and to give them some definition, and because it is also a brown, it is really easy to incorporate into any look that needs some definition. So for those reasons I have been able to reach for the shade Punk quite a bit, and it has obviously resulted in hitting pan, which is really exciting. Unfortunately though, Punk is the only shade that I've hit pan on in this palette so far. So now let's take a closer look at each of the remaining shades. I'm gonna start over here because that's the most natural thing for my brain to do. So this is the shade Blonde, and this shade I really enjoy as an inner corner highlight. I do have it on today for this look, but once you put this shade on, it does sort of transform. You can tell that it has sort of a pinkish shift to it. I would say that I have a mild dip going on in the shade Blonde because I do use such a minuscule amount each time for the inner corner. Next to that we have the shade Bath Water, and this is just your standard light golden shade. And I feel like this one is lacking in pigmentation, and that is going to be a recurring theme, as you will notice once we go through the shades. Next up we have the shade Skimp, and this is one of my favorites in this palette. And Skimp is a light beigey champagne shade, I would say, with that sort of satin finish to it. And this one I love just to sweep all over the lid before I start with my eyeshadow look, sort of as a base. I have a rather big dip going on in the shade Skimp, and I think that is the shade that I am by far the closest on hitting pan on. So hopefully by the next update we will see some pan on the shade Skimp, which I'm really looking forward to. This is the shade Steady, and I am not, unfortunately, a fan of Steady. It does look beautiful in the pan, don't get me wrong, I feel so myself, and this is one of the reasons why I bought the palette, because I do love me some rose gold shimmers. But this one doesn't really show up at all on the lid. Even with setting spray, believe it or not, setting spray does absolutely zero with these shades, so that is quite confusing indeed. And then we have Punk that we've already talked about. Here we have the shade Baby, and this one has the exact same formula as the shade Steady that we talked about that I swatched on my hand. So here is the shade Baby swatch, and it's just a little bit more pink. I've just scratched the surface on this one really, so no dippage going on or nowhere near hitting pan on this shade. Let's move on to this matte shade called Anaheim, and the mattes in this palette are what keeps me reaching for it and going back, because if it was purely the shimmers then I wouldn't even bother trying to pan it, because I really don't enjoy those, but the mattes are of really great quality. Anaheim is the third shade that I have major dippage going on in, and I think I am pretty close to hitting pan on this one as well. I should be able to hit that pan before the next update, hopefully, so that is my goal. I didn't think that I was gonna be this close on Anaheim because I'm not a cool tone lover. I am definitely a warm tone gal, and I do prefer those, but in this palette you don't have that many warm tones at all, so I have been reaching for this one a lot, and I have been enjoying it a lot as well, which is really surprising. But it is the perfect shade to create some definition in the crease. Then we have another matte shade called Stark, and this one is pretty much just my exact skin tone. I am this pale, believe it or not, and I feel like I should be able to hit pan on this shade, but I have been preferring using the shade Skimp all over my eyelids, like I said before, because this one just brings a little bit more life to the eyelids with that sort of satiny finish. Once I have hit pan on Skimp, I am gonna try and reach for Stark to set my eyelids instead. Then we have the shade Zone, and I feel like this one is the exact same depth as the shade Anaheim, just that this one has a little bit more warm undertones, but it's not really warm by any means. I do have some progress on this shade as well, but not as much, surprisingly, as the shade Anaheim. Then we have a gray shades, and gray is not my cup of tea at all. Why did you purchase this palette? Gwen Stefani's fault. I don't have any sort of illusion I'm gonna hit pan on this shade at all. That's just not gonna happen, and even I know that. Now we have reached the last row, and here we have the worst shade in this palette. I even said it in my intro that this shade offers zero pigmentation. It's just pure glitter sparkle, and it's just not what I want to put on my eyelids. So this one we're not trying to pan at all. We're just gonna pretend that this one is not in here. And then we have this shade Harajuku, and by now you should all know how I feel about pinks. We are just not getting along, and I don't like putting them on my face. Now let's talk about this dark blue shade that I'm currently wearing as a blue smoky eye. And I don't hate it, surprisingly enough. I'm not a fan of blues either. And I was also really surprised to find out that this shade has some turquoise glitter sparkles in it, and that looks really stunning on the eyes. And I couldn't just tell by looking at the shades, so I had no idea. And this gold is also really nice. I have swatched it right there, and as you can probably tell, that one has a lot more pigmentation than the other shimmers. So I had hoped that they would have just gone with that formula. And lastly, we have the shade Blackout, and that is just your traditional matte black. This one is also really nice. I do have it on my outer corners today. So let's talk a little bit about my updated goals moving forward with this palette, because I do want to change them a little bit. So firstly, I have decided that I am not going to force myself to use the shades that really lack in pigmentation. So those I'm just gonna scrap completely, because I do want to focus on the shades that I enjoy. And once I do hit pan on a shade, I am going to consider my goal being hit, and then I'm gonna move on to a different shade. And my overall goals, like I said in my intro video, is still to make this palette look used and not brand new, since it has been sitting in my collection for quite a while. And I don't want to completely use the shades up, because I don't feel like that is realistic for myself. So for now, I am going to focus on the shades that I enjoy in this palette and just hitting pan on them and seeing how far I can get with that. And if I do end up making another Pan That Palette series next year, I will definitely put some more thought into choosing the palette, and I would choose something that I enjoy most of the shades. So if you want to join me on this journey, do feel free to subscribe, and also don't forget to give this video a thumbs up before you go. And hopefully I will see you guys in my next video. Take care until then. Bye!